North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Good morning. My name is John David Wells. We report the news here honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We make commentary. That is not news. It's your opinion and my opinion. And so we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. By the way, I don't mean to say that my opinion is your opinion. It is shared. We share our different ideas and our different opinions for the purpose of debate. John Upton says, good morning. John, thanks very much for being part of our broadcast. Welcome. It was a big news day yesterday, just like I foretold on Monday, or actually, when was it? I guess it was, it was yesterday. I said it was a slow news day, so there's going to be big news coming tomorrow. Well, it was. And it did. John Durham issued his report that has been several years in the making. It is being carefully massaged by the mainstream media for political effect. As a matter of fact, the reporting on USA Today that I'm about to share with you is biased. In fact, the first thing you read when you show up is a headline: Special Counsel John Durham criticizes FBI Trump-Russia probe, but recommends no wholesale changes. That's the headline. Right below that is a picture of Michael Horowitz, who is the Justice Department Inspector General. And right underneath there is a caption that says, FBI errors but no bias in the Russia probe. No bias in the Russia probe. And so you can point out, at least I can, that while there may not be any bias in the Russia probe according to USA Today, there certainly is bias in the reporting of it. So let me see if you see what I see. Justice Department Special Counsel John Durham sharply criticized the department and the FBI for the investigation of Russian interference in the 2016 election in his final report released yesterday, but said no policy changes were needed after the agencies previously overhauled their counterintelligence surveillance programs. In other words, what John Durham is saying is that the changes that were made after the FBI and the DOJ were caught red-handed in violating the constitutional rights of people attached to the Trump campaign, including President Trump, those changes are fine, according to John Durham, or at least according to this rendition of the story. Quote, based on the review of Crossfire Hurricane and related intelligence activities, we conclude that the department and the FBI failed to uphold their important mission of strict fidelity to the law in connection with certain events and activities described in this report. And then, to reiterate, USA Today writes, but Durham found no need for wholesale changes at the current Justice Department and FBI, which have already overhauled their policies. Durham characterized the report as accurately describing what happened and assisting the department in responding quickly to politically charged allegations in the future. Quote, this report does not recommend any wholesale changes in the guidelines and policies that the department and the FBI now have in place to ensure proper conduct and accountability in how counterintelligence activities are carried out. Durham submitted the report to Attorney General Merrick Garland Friday of last week. After reading it over the weekend, Garland sent it to Congress at 2 p.m. yesterday afternoon without any additions, redactions, or other modifications. The report culminates a 48-month inquiry since May of 2019, which ran longer than Special Counsel Robert Mueller's original 22-month investigation. Durham charged 3 people, one of whom pled guilty, 2 others won acquittals in a Washington, D.C. trial, or 2 Washington, D.C. trials. Durham spent nearly $6.6 million as special counsel from October 2019 through September 2022, the most recent figures available. Here is what we know about the report. According to USA Today, FBI previously overhauled its surveillance program after criticism of how it handled politically charged cases. Note that they don't point out a specifically politically charged case. That's bias. Remember, the science of propaganda is not what you add to news. It's what you take away. The Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz issued a scathing report in December of 2019 that found the federal surveillance process was not used appropriately. He identified 17 inaccuracies in requests to wiretap then Republican nominee Donald Trump's foreign policy advisor Carter Page in 2016 and 2017, the aforementioned violation of constitutional rights for the President of the United States, George Papadopoulos, and Carter Page. Excuse me, please. In the wake of that report, the new FBI director, Christopher Wray, outlined in January of 2020 an overhaul of its training program for agents and lawyers to ensure future surveillance applications are complete and properly vetted. Durham criticized the FBI applications for surveillance for displaying a, quote, serious lack of analytical rigor, a cavalier attitude toward accuracy and completeness in the initial investigation, which was called Crossfire Hurricane. Based on the review of Crossfire Hurricane and related intelligence activities, we conclude the Department of the FBI failed to uphold their important mission of strict fidelity to the law in connection with certain events and activities described in this report. The FBI issued a statement yesterday saying conduct from 2016 and 2017 was the reason current leadership of the agency had already adopted changes and implemented dozens of corrective actions. Quote, had those reforms been in place in 2016, the missteps identified in the report could have been prevented. This report reinforces the importance of ensuring the FBI continues to do its work with rigor, objectivity, and professionalism the American people deserve and rightly expect. The FBI, for its part, did indeed release a statement yesterday, as covered by Fox News. The FBI responded yesterday, to the scathing report by Special Counsel John Durham. At this moment, let me point out the languaging in this journalistic exercise as well. It is not a scathing report, it is a report. If you are reporting the news, you are reporting the news. The word scathing is inappropriate, just as USA Today soft pedals all of the very harsh criticism in this report. It seems as though Fox News is trying to magnify it. Once again, we point out fact and bias on this broadcast. It doesn't make any difference whose it is. Fox News continues to say that the Department of Justice and FBI failed to uphold their mission of strict fidelity to the law when it launched the Trump-Russia investigation. In a statement to Fox News Digital, the agency touted what it said were dozens of corrective actions already implemented as a result of the Durham investigation. Quote, the conduct in 2016 and 2017 that Special Counsel Durham examined was the reason that current FBI leadership already implemented dozens of corrective actions, which have now been in place for some time. Had those reforms been in place in 2016, the missteps identified in the report could have been prevented. This report reinforces the importance of ensuring that the FBI continues to do its work with the rigor, objectivity, and professionalism the American people deserve and rightly expect. In my opinion, what this report does is it covers gross misconduct on the part of the FBI that at least borders on breaking the law, certainly violating their oaths of office. This is awful. This is absolutely awful. What we have here is we say, the FBI says, well, we implemented dozens and dozens of corrective actions. That's sort of like saying, well, we robbed the bank, but we put the money back before anybody noticed. Or more accurately, we robbed the bank, but as soon as somebody started complaining about it, we put the money back. Did you still rob the bank? Another way of saying this is that it's better to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. The permission granted by the Constitution of the United States and Bill of Rights, totally blown away by the antics of the DOJ and the FBI described in this report. It is inexcusable. It is criminal, in my opinion, especially considering the rhetoric that has come since. The men making mistakes so-called mistakes, the men violating the law described in this report, were involved in a conspiracy to remove Donald Trump from office after the 2016 election. That is a conspiracy for a coup d'etat among government officials. A few people gathering at the Capitol building on January 6th, breaking some furniture and sacrificing one of their own, thanks to what is either a poorly aimed shot, insofar as everybody that saw the video knew that Ashley Babbitt got shot in the face, but somehow that wound morphed to a different part of her body. Isn't that strange? Isn't it strange how gunshot wounds kind of morph around when it comes to the government story surrounding them? Huh. But I digress. What you're seeing here is you are seeing a report that points out in stark terms that the FBI and the Department of Justice, weaponized under the Obama administration, was used against the political opposition using law enforcement as a political tool. The question is simple. The question is simple. Is this the FBI you, as a member of the American people, want? Is this the FBI we want? Is this the Department of Justice that we want? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Is this the DOJ and FBI we want in this nation? The other horrible part of this is that the headline on Fox News regarding this is that Peter Strzok is taking a victory lap. He's one of the guys that should be sitting in a federal prison right this very moment. There are others. There are others. There are reactions all over America. I'm interested in yours. John Durham laid out a malfunctioning, perhaps even criminal, DOJ and FBI in his report released yesterday. The mainstream media will dismiss it as nothing. They will parse it into, well, it's really not a problem. They fixed all the problems. Excuse me? So in other words, after committing a crime, they fixed all the ways that they used to commit the crime, and now everything's okay? So the crime really didn't exist. Is that right? Going back to the bank robbery analogy, I go rob a bank and so on and so forth. And what I end up doing is making sure that the way I robbed the bank is impossible next time. And I'm supposed to be exonerated from robbing the bank. That's the way I see it. What about you? This is the Wells Report. Stick around. We'll be right back in just a moment. Stand by. We'll be right back. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. You can respond via the telephone 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. You can also respond via the chat room that we have available to us, and we hope that you do. We sincerely hope that you do. And we'll be going to that right this very moment, in fact. Hang on a second. I'm doing a little bit of technical jargoning. Actually, it's not jargon. It's setting up. Okay. Got that done. All right. Responding to the current news of the day that has Peter Strzok taking a victory lap. Ann Guzman says Strzok should be hoping nobody reads the report and then realizes why he was fired. He should be put in jail, not suing to get his job and his back pay. Let's see. Wonder what the FBI really corrected. Absolutely nothing. No, I'm sure that they actually made some corrections. I'm sure they did. But to cover their tracks, not necessarily to prevent it in the future. Because Peter Strzok's conduct and Andrew McCabe's conduct proves one thing that is absolutely undeniable. That the people involved in this egregious violation of the Constitution and Bill of Rights don't think they did anything wrong. They don't believe they've done anything wrong. They believe the all-powerful DOJ and FBI can do anything it really wants as long as they cover their tracks afterwards and promise never to do it again. In other words, asking for forgiveness instead of permission. Apply that to any other crime in the United States committed by anybody else. There is something else. What if this all occurred in a reversal politically? What if Donald Trump's DOJ had gone after Joe Biden during the 2020 campaign? And what if the FBI and all of these other agencies, the DHS, the IRS, all of these other agencies had gone after Joe Biden and Democrats? What would this report say with the Democrat version of John Durham. I dare say it would be somewhat different, as would be the outcome. That's what I believe. What new information did this Durham report reveal? Indeed, Inspector General Michael Horowitz nailed the FBI and DOJ for this very conduct. Are there new things here? Maybe not. But what this does is that it contrasts a couple of different things. One, this report actually had fact, evidence, and reality behind it, which the Mueller report never had. That's thing number one. Thing number two, it is another source of information that Michael Horowitz released to the people of the United States. It is an official government report. And just because this recommends no further action doesn't necessarily mean that a crime has not been committed and should not be followed up on. What this is a body of evidence. And oh, by the way, what's new? That the FBI and Department of Justice would abandon fidelity, integrity, and commitment to law enforcement for the sake of politics. That's new. That's what's new in this report. And if you don't see it, it's because you don't care about the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. What you have to understand is sooner or later, this grotesque monster will turn its baleful eye on you, Isaac. It's just a matter of time. He says the Mueller report had facts. Trump supporters ignored it or didn't agree with it. Whatever, Isaac. Back with more coming up in just a moment. You're listening to The Wells Report, which will be back in 4 minutes. You're listening to The Wells Report, which will be back in 4 minutes. This is The Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We're discussing the release of the Durham probe. We've given you the news. There are reactions, most notably from former President Donald Trump. He said yesterday that former FBI Director James Comey and Democrats need to be held accountable for spending years investigating alleged collusion between Trump and Russia. Now that Special Counsel John Durham has released a report that says the Trump-Russia probe never should have been launched. Quote, I, and much more importantly, the American public, have been victims of a long-running and treasonous charade started by Democrats, started by Comey. There must be a heavy price to pay for putting our country through this, unquote. Durham's report found that the Department of Justice and FBI, quote, failed to uphold their mission of strict fidelity to the law when it launched the Trump-Russia investigation. Let me translate that for you. They broke the law. This language, very carefully laid out, belies what we all know. There are two standards of justice in the United States. Two. One, for people of one group, another for the other group in a two-party system. I'll let you figure out which groups I'm discussing. In an exclusive interview with Fox News Digital, my mouth. In an exclusive take three. In an exclusive interview with Fox News Digital, thank you, Trump said activities surrounding the FBI's original Trump-Russia investigation were a total disgrace, and that public anger over the report is at a level I have not seen before. This report took a long time because John Durham is a very thorough investigator, said Trump, but the results are unequivocal and an absolute disaster in terms of justice. He added, the national security implications of what they did are very grave. It turned out to be a giant and very dangerous hoax that he would have further comment in the near future. I can imagine so. The Durham report was released yesterday afternoon after his years-long investigations into the origins of the FBI's original investigation known as Crossfire Hurricane. That investigation looked into whether the Trump campaign coordinated with Russia to influence the 2016 presidential election. His report spanned more than 300 pages. Let's dwell on that for just a couple of moments. First of all, this is Fox News reporting. It's biased. Keep that in mind as you hear me report this. It was released after years-long investigation into Crossfire Hurricane. It spanned more than 300 pages, and it looked into whether the Trump campaign colluded with Russia to influence the 2016 presidential election. The DOJ then worked to influence the 2020 political election. In other words, all these changes they're talking about mattered not. The FBI and DOJ work against the interests of the political opposition. They are no longer law enforcement agencies or administrators of American law in the case of the DOJ. They are now politicians working to influence elections, something that they pinned on President Trump in 2016 and now do as a matter of course. That's something else that's new, Isaac, in case you don't know. The implications of this, I have to agree with President Trump, are very grave. Very grave. Based on the fact that they recognized that there was misconduct, law breaking involved in the FBI's investigation coming up to the 2016 election and after the election of President Donald Trump. And yet, after all of these ballyhooed, acknowledged, and for example, there are no further actions needed after the new rules have gone into effect, which happened, by the way, before the 2020 election, they went ahead and interfered with the 2020 election again. And now, with all of these indictments of President Trump, they're continuing it at a different level. But what has happened to American law? Does it matter anymore? BLM rioters go out and destroy things, kill people, etc. January 6th rioters go to the Capitol building and are accused of committing a coup. All the while, when an actual conspiracy to commit a coup d'etat in the United States occurred among the leaders of the FBI, the DOJ, the Department of Homeland Security, which is now nothing more than an anachronistic joke, all based on politics. The implications are obvious to anyone that is willing to see it. That excludes, of course, the mainstream media. This is awful. Absolutely awful. Durham added that his investigation also revealed that senior FBI personnel displayed a serious lack of analytical rigor toward the information they received, especially information received from politically affiliated persons and entities. This information in part triggered and sustained Crossfire Hurricane and contributed to the subsequent need for Special Counsel Mueller's investigation. In particular, there was significant reliance on investigative leads provided or funded directly or indirectly by Trump's political opponents. In other words, the Clinton campaign opposition research was remanufactured into evidence to justify the Mueller investigation, which led nowhere. That is nothing more than just degenerate, grotesque law enforcement misconduct. There is not a police officer anywhere in the United States that would not have been fired with prejudice, finishing his career or her career for conduct anywhere close to this. And Peter Strzok is taking a victory lap? Really? Is that what's going on here? In point of fact, he is. Let me share that with you. The headline from Fox News, it is, of course, biased. The headline is, disgraced ex-FBI agent Peter Strzok reacts to the Durham report on Trump-Russia collusion with a victory lap. Really? Talk about an FBI agent rubbing the American people's nose in his own defecation. That is exactly what Peter Strzok is doing here. Disgraced former FBI agent Peter Strzok appeared to take a victory lap while reacting to the release of special counsel John Durham's report on the origin of the Trump-Russia investigation. Strzok, who was fired by the FBI in 2018 following the surfacing of anti-Trump texts he sent to his then-lover, FBI lawyer Lisa Page, took to social media after the report's release, listing multiple individuals who ultimately faced federal charges stemming from the Russia investigation. In his tweet, Strzok listed the name of 9 individuals, including former Trump 2016 campaign chairman Paul Manafort and advisor Roger Stone, noted that 6 of them were found guilty of their charges, 2 were found not guilty, 1 remains wanted by the FBI. Most of the charges involved financial crimes and making false statements, but the investigation ultimately found no evidence of Russia collusion. Peter Strzok. Peter Strzok says, point me to the confirmation bias here. Okay, Peter. Look in the mirror. Good heavens. Later, Strzok also appeared on liberal network MSNBC and claimed the report, quote, didn't come up with anything, calling it a predictable, sad ending to an investigation that should have never taken place. Is he talking about the Durham investigation or the Mueller investigation? Clearly, the Durham investigation. Despite Strzok's claim, the report, which was released after a years-long investigation into the origins of FBI's original investigation into alleged coordination between Russia and the Trump campaign, concluded the department, the FBI, failed to uphold their mission of strict fidelity to the law in connection with certain events and activities described in the report. They broke the law. In the report, Durham said his investigation also revealed that senior FBI personnel displayed a serious lack of analytical rigor toward the information they received, especially information received from politically affiliated persons and entities. It's right there. It's right there. It's right there. Peter Strzok is a politician. He's actually a political hitman. And he did his work. And he is now quite proud of it. Quite proud of it. This is horrible. So proud of it, in fact, he went on television to say so. It's unbelievable. And like I said, you know, the thing that you need to keep in mind here, these people got away with it. What does that mean? That means we're going to see it again. When Donald Trump was being chased down by Robert Mueller and the rest of those guys, I could see that there was warpage, twisting, massaging of law to suit a political imperative. And I said so. What I also said was this: there are now very serious allegations against the current sitting president. And I said that should the Republicans now, who are chasing down President Biden, follow the same course the Democrats did, I will be as equally stinging in my criticism of what they do, just as I was when I was reporting about the Democrat stylings, cherry picking, editing, manipulation, misconduct, misdirection. If the Republican Party follows that regarding this president, I'll stomp all over them just like I did the Democrats. Because this is all misconduct. The only difference between Donald Trump and President Biden is that there aren't hundreds of specialized or special or what's the word? I'm sorry, I'm angry. Suspicious incident reports surrounding what President Trump was doing regarding his supposed interactions with Russia to manipulate the 2016 election. There's actual evidence against Joe Biden. Should there be a special counsel appointed? Possibly. Should there be on under oath testimony? Absolutely. Should that lead to criminal charges? Maybe. I don't believe in throwing presidents in jail. I believe that history will be a harsh enough judge, that the sentence of disgrace will be far worse for a president than, say, for example, anyone else. That being said, what we have is a president who was besmirched by the DOJ, FBI, and the political investigations, quote unquote, investigations that chased him down during his entire presidency and his campaign. And what we cannot have is another president distracted by what are fruitless investigations. I said the same thing about the Democrats that I'll say about Republicans. If you're going to take a shot at the president of the United States, you, by God, better have proof. And you better win. And how you can win if you're Republicans going after Joe Biden in the current climate, where, say, for example, a Republican prosecution of somebody accused of misconduct occurs in Washington, D.C., before a jury that can't read, can't see, can't hear, and can't admit the facts that they're being presented with. Tells you everything you need to know about where this country is when it comes to law enforcement, which means there is no law enforcement, which means a grotesque monster has invaded the government of the United States and uses its law enforcement, law definition, and law enforcement capabilities as organs in a monster that will damage the United States of America, possibly beyond repair. Those people that ignore this current mess are people that need to reevaluate just exactly why they live here. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to The Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. This is The Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us. Telephone number 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. My friends, our law enforcement has been caught red-handed in violating their oaths of office, their national mission. And we are in trouble here. And we'd better get a hold of this. Now, it's obvious, at least to this reporter, it is obvious that there will be very little, if anything, that happens because of this report to the people involved in this report. All the people, all the players that I've mentioned before have not been indicted for the coup d'etat that they conspired to activate. Comey, Brennan, McCabe, all of those guys. They've not been indicted. They have not seriously been challenged from a legal standpoint. And that's awful. Because these people stand to get away with all this. And during the Biden administration, none of this is going to be acted on. There is an election in less than 2 years. I asked earlier this hour whether or not this was the Department of Justice or the FBI that you wanted. I asked those questions. It stands. Do you want this DOJ? Do you want this FBI? If you do, then by all means, elect every Democrat you can. If you want this level of law enforcement, where law enforcement is based on politics instead of the rule of law, vote for Democrats. Now, make no mistake, you're not getting a bargain voting for Republicans either. I talked about the photographic negative of this, where President Trump would be guilty of trying to concoct some sort of cockamamie idea that maybe Joe Biden was conspiring with with Russia. Hey, I can be sarcastic. With Russia. And that, by the way, would be untrue, but they foisted this hoax and this investigation on Joe Biden. I talked a little bit about that. The hue and cry that would cross the land would be eye-watering in the minimum, in the very smallest little particle. It would be a disaster because it would be splattered all over the headlines of every major newspaper, every major news source, everywhere in the world. But that's not what we got. That's not what we have. So who can effect the change necessary to restore the United States of America and its assertion that the rule of law is essential? Who can do that? We, the people, with our votes. We, the people. with our votes. I have been accused of being partisan on this broadcast. And when I say that if you want this to continue, if you want this political law enforcement, if you want all of this, then by all means keep electing Democrats. That is not a partisan statement. That is a statement of fact. Our major cities are run by Democrats. The supposed district attorneys in those cities pick and choose what law they will enforce based on the person who may or may not have committed it. It is a political endeavor, not a legal one. And all those people are Democrats. In other words, this isn't partisanship. This is fact. If you are a Democrat, you had better start looking at who you vote for. Look at all the garbage that comes with Democrat administrations. Look at all of it. From our schools to our universities, to crime in the streets, to importing homeless people into our nation. By the millions. Displacing American homeless people for the sake of illegal immigrants. That's happening too. Who's doing it? The Democrat Party is doing it. Again, not a partisan statement. And by the way, I'm not a Republican. I am a conservative. And the Republican Party is decidedly not conservative. My friends, what kind of country do you want to continue living in? The report issued yesterday by John Durham tells us all, in no uncertain terms, the Department of Justice and the FBI have decided to become political organizations. Is that what you want? My name is John David Wells. This is the Wells Report. It is the 16th of May, year of our Lord 2023. It is Tuesday. It's beautiful outside here. I hope it's beautiful outside where you are. Back with more in just a moment. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will be back in 4 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. We report the news, honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We make commentary. Just my opinion, just as valuable as yours. Your opinion, my opinion, leads to debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. While we're discussing our nation's government malfunctioning at a grotesque and illegal level, there seems to be yet another report regarding another federal agency that has equally disturbing implications. Listen to this, being reported by Fox News. The IRS has removed the entire investigative team from its multi-year tax fraud investigation of Hunter Biden. A whistleblower who raised concerns about the handling of the case is claiming the move was, quote, clearly retaliatory, unquote. This according to a report in the New York Post yesterday. The whistleblower's attorney told Congress that the removal was on the order of the Department of Justice. So much for all of the remedial actions taken following the hoax of the Mueller report, Crossfire Hurricane, and the sundering of the Trump presidency. This is horrible. Absolutely horrible. It just gets worse every second. This is what Democrats vote. This is what Democrat vote leads. This is what Democrat votes lead to. This is the garbage that comes along with the pretty rhetoric of campaigns. The reality is much different. Today, the Internal Revenue Service criminal supervisory special agent we represent was informed that he and his entire investigative team are being removed from the ongoing and sensitive investigation of the high-profile, controversial subject about which our client sought to make whistleblower disclosures to Congress. He was informed of the change at the request of the Department of Justice. This according to attorneys Mark Lytle and Tristan Levitt. And so, should you decide to step up and say, for example, follow your oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign or domestic, you can expect to lose your job. That's where we are. Why is that okay? Well, it's okay because there's a Democratic administration in town. And it appears that they have dirty hands. And they're getting dirtier every second. Here's the New York Post article. The IRS yesterday removed the entire investigative team from its long-running tax fraud probe of first son Hunter Biden in alleged retaliation against the whistleblower who recently contacted Congress to allege a cover-up in the case. The purge allegedly was done on the orders of the Department of Justice. The whistleblower's attorneys informed congressional leaders in a letter. Today, this is a quote from that letter. Today, the Internal Revenue Service criminal supervisory special agent we represent was informed that he and his entire investigative team are being removed from the ongoing and sensitive investigation of the high-profile controversial subject about which our client sought to make his whistleblower disclosures to Congress. He was informed of the change and found that the request for that change came from the Department of Justice. The whistleblower who supervised the Hunter Biden probe since early 2020 has not publicly identified the first son as the subject of the case that says he is being brushed under the rug, but congressional sources do confirm that it is Hunter Biden. Quote, on April 27th, 2023, IRS Commissioner Daniel Werfel appeared before the House Committee on Ways and Means. He testified, quote, I can say without any hesitation, there will be no retaliation for anyone making an allegation or a call to a whistleblower hotline. However, that statement is clearly retaliatory and may also constitute obstruction of a congressional inquiry, the lawyers went on to say. Our client has a right to make disclosures to Congress. He is protected by 5 U.S. Code, Section 2302, from retaliatory personnel actions, including receiving a significant change in duties, responsibilities, or working conditions, which this clearly is, because of his disclosures to Congress. Quote, any attempt by any government official to prevent a federal employee from furnishing information to Congress is also a direct violation of long-standing appropriations restrictions. Furthermore, 18 U.S. Code, Section 1505, makes it a crime to obstruct an investigation of Congress. Crime. Crime all over the place. Who's running the show? Democrats. This is not a partisan broadcast. This is the news. The whistleblower's team added, we respectfully request that you give this matter your prompt attention. Removing the experienced investigators who have worked this case for years are now the subject and are now subject matter experts. is exactly the sort of issue our client intended to blow the whistle on to begin with. The IRS and Justice Department have not immediately responded to requests for comment from the New York Post. Hunter Biden's legal team, the White House, also did not immediately respond. The whistleblower's representatives declined to comment further. Hunter Biden, 53 years old, is under investigation for not paying taxes on millions in largely foreign-sourced income. He was in good spirits yesterday, gave journalists a thumbs up while seated near his dad, President Biden, at the graduation ceremony for his daughter Maisie from the University of Pennsylvania. The first son wrote in communications retrieved from the abandoned laptop that he, quote, paid up to half of his income to his father, unquote. Hunter frequently involved then Vice President Biden in his international business relationships, something denied by President Biden. The whistleblower was ousted from the investigation along with an unknown number of subordinates at roughly the same time as the Justice Department released a long-awaited report by Special Counsel John Durham detailing bias in the FBI investigation of former President Donald Trump's alleged links to Russia. The cover-up has already started. It started hours after the report, the Durham report, was made public. The IRS whistleblower emerged last month when Lytle informed Congress that his client wanted to share information about preferential treatment in the Hunter Biden case and alleged false testimony to Congress by Attorney General Merrick Garland, who repeatedly assured lawmakers the Delaware U.S. Attorney David Weiss can unilaterally make charging decisions in the investigation. Levitt, president of the group Empower Oversight, later joined as co-counsel. The informant, who is yet to appear at the Capitol, has already made disclosures to inspectors general at the Justice and Treasury Department. 1 week after the whistleblower stepped forward, Hunter Biden's attorneys met with Justice Department leaders in a sign that a charging decision may come soon in the tax fraud investigation that reportedly began in 2018. NBC reported last month there was growing frustration within the FBI over the fact that Weiss, a Trump administration holdover recommended to his post by Delaware's 2 Democrat senators, had not yet brought charges against Hunter Biden after the Bureau concluded most of its work last year. A different whistleblower informed Senator Chuck Grassley this month the FBI has an informant and an informant file from 2020 alleging that President Biden accepted bribes as vice president. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer of Kentucky issued a subpoena for that particular piece of information. The FBI has refused to give the document to Congress. Hunter confirmed he was under investigation for tax fraud shortly after his father won the 2020 election, and that he reportedly borrowed about $2 million last year to pay off back taxes, though doing so doesn't legally absolve him from the original non-payment, which seems to be interesting. He didn't pay his taxes. Someone paid his taxes for him. That doesn't absolve Hunter Biden from not paying his taxes? I'm sorry. The FBI was nailed by the DOJ Inspector General and John Durham for committing anti-constitutional, anti-American crimes against President Trump, his campaign, his administration, and his officials. And yet, just by changing the operating rules, well, it's all done with. Well, why isn't it all done with Hunter Biden? What do you mean it doesn't absolve Hunter Biden from his crimes? He fixed it. He paid the taxes. Really? Like I said, the 2-tier justice system is rearing its ugly head again. Remember, the investigative team from the IRS looking into Hunter Biden was removed by the Department of Justice. The Attorney General of the United States is Merrick Garland. He came within a hair's breadth of becoming a Supreme Court justice. A court that is being hammered on by the mainstream media for somehow being corrupt. If Attorney General Merrick Garland was Associate Justice Merrick Garland, would there be more or less so-called corruption in the Supreme Court of the United States? You tell me. The federal investigation reportedly looked into whether Hunter Biden laundered money, violated the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which, by the way, was applied to famous Trump administration officials, and also lied about drug use on a gun purchase form. House Republicans, meanwhile, are investigating President Biden's role in the family overseas business dealings, through which Hunter Biden and first brother James Biden earned millions from partnerships with wealthy people in countries where their powerful relative held sway. Joe Biden met with relatives' business associates on many occasions, including those from China, Kazakhstan, Mexico, Russia, and Ukraine. House Republicans allege the Biden family members offered no legitimate business services and were merely selling access to the United States government. And so says the New York Post. My fellow Americans, we find ourselves in a very, very grave spot, to echo the words of former President Donald Trump. And this isn't likely to get better. What are we doing to ourselves? What are we allowing to be done in our names? Is it acceptable to you? Yes or no? Tell me why. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to The Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Sorry about the misannouncements on time. In order to fix this, I have to create separate videos, and the technology of which is something that I'm still working on. So we'll be back with that. Another technical note here on the Wells Report. I want to make sure that you get. There seems to be a UKR sticker. I do not know what a UKR sticker is. It says, "I stand with Ukraine." Okay. Well, I certainly look at Ukraine as a country working to try to stop an overwhelmingly powerful force from essentially overrunning their country. But I didn't put that. I didn't put that on my. I didn't put that on my broadcast. Let me ask you this: Are we talking about? Are we talking about on? This is on YouTube, Don? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know where that came from. I'll try to figure it out. YouTube is kind of weird. I don't know what's going on. Yeah. If I ever advertise something, it's going to be something that hopefully makes your life better, that makes your existence a little bit easier to deal with. It was on Facebook. Okay, so it's on Facebook. It's also on YouTube and Twitch. Well, it's not on my original feed, and I don't know what's going on there. All I can tell you is that maybe people are noticing the Wells Report and trying to ally themselves with it. But I wouldn't be talking about Ukraine under those circumstances. You know, I have found an awful lot about Ukraine. Oh, it's gone now. Okay. I found out an awful lot about how overarchingly powerful governments can stomp on a populace for political reasons. And I've also found how those countries can react when that overarching government sees fit to essentially overrun or destroy the country that they want back in their particular fold. Ukraine handed all of its citizens weapons of war to fight a war. Are we getting the correct information about what's going on in that war? I have no idea. All I can do at this point is simply say that when you're talking about a country like Ukraine that spent almost a century under totalitarian rule, that the lust for freedom and liberty is so strong in a populace where people that advocated for that just disappeared. When you find out that they are perfectly willing to engage that superior, or shall we say, larger, more powerful force that should be heartening to all of us. It also, by the way, should be a warning to those people who believe, for whatever reason, that overarching government is the way forward. It is not. Not in any way, shape, or form. And they should relent. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. What's happening on the United States-Mexico border with the expiration of Title 42? USA Today has news on that. We'll share that with you coming up in just a couple of moments. I wonder if anything we're about to find out is true. Fortunately, I live in Texas, so I can make phone calls. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will be back in 4 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Title 42 expired. It was a mechanism used to keep illegal immigration from becoming an onslaught. Many people, including the Biden administration, believed that as soon as Title 42 was set aside, that there would be an onslaught of more illegal immigration into the United States. Strangely enough, there is reporting that says that is not happening. Really? USA Today reports as follows. Pandemic-era immigration restrictions are finally gone, but what that means for the U.S. border is still unclear. The Biden administration said yesterday it's still assessing the impact of the end of the controversial immigration rules known as Title 42, which made it easier to expel migrants at the southern border. The rules, which ended Friday, had been in place for 3 years as part of the public health emergency for COVID-19. Thousands of migrants have been waiting in Mexico for those restrictions to end. Analysts predicted chaos and a surge of migrants looking to cross the border once the policy was finally lifted. So far, that hasn't happened, says USA Today. The situation on the border is very fluid, said Blas Nunez Neto, Assistant Secretary for Border and Immigration Policy. This is a continuously evolving situation that we are monitoring in real time. USA Today reports 3 takeaways from the administration's termination of Title 42. In the days leading up to the end of Title 42, the U.S. averaged roughly 10,000 migrant encounters per day along the U.S.-Mexico border as immigrants sought to enter the U.S. before the policy was terminated. Those numbers were expected to surge following the termination of Title 42. It is early. However, administration officials say they have not seen any signs that expected surge, is happening. In fact, the opposite has occurred. Again, reports USA Today. The border has remained relatively calm in the 4 days since Title 42 ended, with the number of migrants crossing illegally dropping by 50%, this according to the Department of Homeland Security. The U.S. has averaged fewer than 5,000 migrant encounters per day since Title 42 was terminated. It's too soon to draw any conclusions about why the numbers are down, says Nunez Neto. But several factors could be playing a role. For one, the administration has revamped the system to crack down on illegal crossings and to offer a new legal pathway for migrants who often pay thousands of dollars to smugglers to get them across the border. Although the Border Patrol can no longer expel migrants for public health reasons, the administration has a new rule that migrants seeking asylum at the U.S.-Mexico border will be turned away unless they first applied online or sought protection in a country they've passed through. Migrants caught illegally crossing will not be allowed to return for 5 years. They can be criminally prosecuted if they attempt to cross again. Not that this has happened with people who were deported from this nation, in many cases, many times. Families are allowed in. As their immigration cases progress, they will face curfews and GPS monitoring. Another factor might be deterring migrants from crossing the border is that Mexico has deployed large number of law enforcement and military troops along their border in recent days in anticipation of the expiration of Title 42. Panama and Colombia have also undertaken a joint effort to crack down on networks that smuggle migrants across the border. Even so, quote, we are mindful that smugglers will continue to look for ways to take advantage of the change in border policies, said Nunez Neto. It's also important to note that he said that the conditions are causing migrants to flee their homes and cross illegally into the U.S. have not changed. Those conditions include extreme poverty. We continue to see more displaced people in the hemisphere than we have in decades. The Biden administration has expelled thousands of migrants who crossed into the U.S. illegally since the termination of Title 42. U.S. authorities have returned to enforcing the nation's immigration laws under Title 8, a section of the U.S. Code that spells out who is admissible into the country, criminal penalties for crossing the border illegally, and the expedited removal of migrants who are deemed inadmissible. Since Friday, hundreds of migrants, including Venezuelans, Cubans, and Nicaraguans, have already been returned to Mexico since the end of Title 42. Thousands, including single adults and families, have been sent home to more than 10 countries, such as Colombia, Honduras, and Peru, said Nunez Neto. Thousands more are currently being held in facilities run by Customs and Border Protection or Immigrations and Customs Enforcement and are moving through the expedited removal process in a streamlined manner, he said. The U.S. response to the end of Title 42 relies heavily on the cooperation of other countries, but details still need to be worked out. The Department of Homeland Security announced on 27 April that it would open regional processing centers in Guatemala and Colombia to reduce irregular migration and facilitate safe, orderly, humane, and lawful pathways from the Americas to countries such as the United States, Canada, and Spain. But Guatemalan President Alejandro Giammattei has complained about a lack of communication between two governments. He's even been calling Republican lawmakers in Congress and asking for their help. U.S. officials deny any discord with Guatemala over processing centers and insist that Guatemala has agreed in principle to help with processing centers, but questions about the implementation need to be resolved. U.S. officials remain concerned about the impact a Florida judge's ruling last Thursday could have on immigration policy after Title 42. U.S. District Judge T. Kent Wetherill in the Northern District of Florida temporarily blocked the Customs and Border Protection from going ahead with a plan to release or parole some migrants to alleviate overcrowding at immigration holding facilities. Fearing a surge in migrants once Title 42 lifted, Customs and Border Protection said it would parole certain migrants without what's known as a notice to appear, essentially a charging document, because those documents take additional time to prepare. Wetherill said that a Biden administration memorandum outlining the parole policy appeared to conflict with a decision from the court in a separate case earlier this year. Nunez Neto said the administration is concerned about the potential impact the Florida ruling could have on the length of time it takes to process migrants. Every individual we encounter is thoroughly vetted against our national security and public safety systems, adding that individuals are detained if they have outstanding warrants or have any affiliation with terrorism. The Biden administration is expected to appeal that ruling. Another hearing in the case is set for this upcoming Friday. This reported by Michael Collins, covering the White House. Contributing was John Fritzy, Maureen Gropa, Lauren Villagran, Aaron Mansfield, David Jackson, and the Associated Press. That's the news. Well, if true, that is better. That is a good thing. Title 42 was, as I've reported on this broadcast many times, not the correct law to keep people out of the United States of America. It was handy. It was essentially a warpage of Title 42 that is designed to keep people who are diseased from entering the country. Well, that was, shall we say, somewhat off-putting to people, and for good reason, because the first thing you do, you have to lead with the fact that the people coming to the United States are diseased. There have been many, many reports about that very thing. And with COVID, it was convenient, but it was the wrong law. Title 8 requires different documentation, requires a different set of processing rules that are longer, more difficult. that this onslaught that was expected is being reported as not as much as we've been seeing in previous months is interesting to me. I don't know what has actually happened or what is actually happening. Why is this significant? Well, as we have seen in the ways of political implementation of law, there are certain things that can be redefined that affect all of these numbers. Is that the case? I do not know. I don't know. I'm also in a position where I've gone through the news every day on a comprehensive basis since 9/11 2001. Before that, but in this current iteration of the show that I do, the Wells Report, that's a good touchstone. What I have seen is I have seen the news manipulated for political effect, propaganda, in fact. What I have seen is a very disturbing degradation in the credibility of news reporting in the United States, again, based on the political imperative as opposed to the factual one. Is that in play here? Perhaps. Perhaps. But the fact that I have to ask that question, the fact that I have to point out that in the political world things can be redefined for the sake of statistics, should tell you something. In other words, where is the trust level of the United States government among the people of the United States? Where is the trust level for the American media among the people of the United States? I assure you, it is not where it needs to be. I assure you that. By the way, Mike Renouy points out that California is now talking about giving unemployment benefits to illegal immigrants coming to their state. They can't afford it. They are tens of billions of dollars behind in the budget deficit of California, let alone the actual debt that California owes its citizens. They can't afford that. Just as they can't afford reparations, which was some delirium thrown out before the voter electorate. That was a political styling by Gavin Newsom, who has now said, well, we really can't do that. Well, yeah, you can't do that because it would cost the state $800 billion. You see, not only do we elect the wrong people, we empower them far beyond their abilities. The idea that people can look beyond politics to find fact is almost gone in the U.S. It fascinates me that we're in a position here where we see that the Biden administration doesn't see the onslaught that they were looking for or that they thought would happen. Maybe it's because they're not looking in the right places. Again, I don't know. And what does that tell you about the trust factor, credibility factor of the Biden administration with the American people? Nature abhors a vacuum. It will do anything it can to fill it. Likewise, the people of the United States will do what is ever necessary to fill the vacuum of true fact coming from both the government and the media. That the media then falls back on, my God, these are just horrifyingly terrible anti-American conspiracy theorists, is a joke. What do they expect? I can answer the questions that I have. I can answer the questions that I've asked. The credibility of the United States media is at what must be an all-time low. The credibility of the United States government is probably even worse. The people of the United States spend far too much money on a government that is not credible. The Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights specifically, points out that in order for there to be freedom and liberty, there must be a free press. That's why it's in the First Amendment, the very first amendment to the Constitution that sought the ability for the American people to actually know what their government is doing. That is a mission that the American media has cashed in. That's where we find ourselves. And why do we find ourselves here? Why do we find ourselves in this circumstance? The reason we find ourselves in this circumstance is because of the votes we made in 2020. The non-governmental baggage dragged into the public domain by the Democrat Party speaks for itself. The hypocrisy, the willingness to split the legal aspects of American life, the rule of law, the administration of the law, the enforcement of it, the willingness to split that along party lines is a result. This is the Wells Report. The Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. What has happened to the thinking beyond our beer companies? Beer in the United States it's a pastime. It's a hobby. Beer is wonderful. Although I drink ciders now because I don't like the bloat. I got to tell you, my adoration for beer is long-standing. I love beer. Beer's good. But what happened? What has happened to our beer manufacturers? Bud Light decided to do this advertising campaign reaching out to the LGBTQ plus community and ended up shooting themselves in the feet at epic levels. Lost in all of that was a pro-women ad from March for Miller Lite. I don't know who did it, but probably somebody from Bud Light said, hey, you know what? We're not the only ones. As reported by Fox News today, Miller Lite's pro-women ad for March went viral yesterday. Conservatives blasted the video as woke, with many drawing parallels to Bud Light's current marketing controversy. Miller Lite released a liberal ad campaign about the same time period that recently went viral for alienating beer drinkers. You know, it's amazing. It's amazing how the American people communicate with government agencies and their big corporations. You know, that's one of the great things about capitalism. If you screw up, people will stop buying your stuff. Miller Lite released a liberal ad campaign about the same time in a celebration of Women's History Month. Miller Lite used comedian Ilana Glazer to condemn the bikini-laden women beer ads of the past. Quote, centuries later, how did the industry pay homage to the founding mothers of beer? They put us in bikinis, unquote. She said that as she walked past beer advertisements featuring bikini-clad women and throwing one in the trash. Wow, look at this. It's time beer made it up to women. So today, Miller Lite is on a mission to clean up not just their stuff, but the whole industry, the whole beer industry stuff. Miller Lite has been scouring the internet for all of this garbage and buying it back. The ad shared a URL to Miller Lite's website for the campaign, but the URL now reroutes to the main Miller Lite website instead of the one for the campaign. Apparently, people who drink beer are not interested in Miller Lite joining the hashtag MeToo movement. In a Forbes interview in March, Miller Lite's Senior Director of Marketing, Elizabeth Hitch, spoke about the company's goal to turn bad old objectifying beer advertising into good literal fertilizer to grow hops that will be donated to female brewers. Really? Let me ask you a question. If you are one of the Wells women, did you ever wear a bikini? The answer is yes. Why? Because in the words of Mike Myers in the Austin Powers movies, bikinis are dead sexy. They're beautiful. You know, of all the clothing that we put on human beings, those are perhaps the most alluring. Is that objectifying women? When you consider that most of the bikinis ever sold in the United States were purchased by women, the answer is no. These same people who are saying, my God, we should stop objectifying women, are some of the same people that advocate for women being able to walk around shirtless, braless, just like men do. Really. This is the hypocrisy. And it's silly. Men are the far and away biggest consumers of beer. Most men are heterosexual, 90% or more. Is there anything better than, say, for example, having a beer on the shore of an ocean or a lake and watching beautiful women wandering around in bikinis? The answer is no. There's nothing wrong with any of that. Nobody forced those women to step into bikinis. We're not objectifying women. In fact, I believe that the bikini celebrates women, don't you? What am I getting wrong here? I mean, what am I messing up? I mean, and when it comes down to objectifying women, who does the most work on objectifying women? Would it be men or women? These are important questions. Not as important as the government of the United States using law as a political tool, or the willingness to apply law unfairly, unjustly against political opponents. But still, when you consider all the lives ruined because men think women are hot, well, it's worth talking about, don't you think? I hope you've enjoyed this edition of the Wells Report. We'll be back tomorrow morning. I'll see you then. Hey, thanks. I appreciate this, folks. Thank you very much for being with us today. Take good care of yourselves. I've got to get rolling because my son Colton just asked me for a bacon and egg sandwich, and I'm going to go make one.